This ride takes us from Bảo Lạc to Cho Ra, and then onward to one of northern Vietnam's most beautiful natural destinations, Ba Be Lake. It's a route that shows you something many travelers miss, how the far north is not one landscape, but a series of connected highland worlds, each shaped by mountains, rivers, and the people who have learned to live here for generations. Bảo Lạc sits in Cao Bang province, one of Vietnam's great borderland regions. Culturally, this area is extraordinary. More than 90% of the population in Bảo Lạc district is made up of ethnic minorities, including groups like the Dai, Nùng, Hmong, Dao, San Chi, and the Lo Lo, one of the smaller and most distinctive communities in northern Vietnam. In villages around here, it's very common for an ethnic language to be the language of home, while Vietnamese is used mainly for school, trade, and official situations. Geographically, you're riding through a region where mountains dominate. Cao Bang is part of a huge limestone and mountain zone, and UNESCO recognizes this on the Cao Bang side as the Nan Nuoc Cao Bang UNESCO Global Geopark, where mountainous landforms cover about 90% of the area. And what makes Bảo Lạc especially interesting is that it sits between two major global geopark regions, Sao Bang's geopark to one side, and the famous Dong Van Karst Plateau area of Hà Giang to the other. In other words, you're traveling through one of the most geologically dramatic corners of the country. The road reflects that. It doesn't run straight because it can't. It follows valleys, crosses river corridors, climbs ridgelines, and then drops back down again. Villages appear only where the land allows it, near streams, at the edge of flatter basins, or tucked into protected folds of the mountains. When you travel here, you start to understand how settlement patterns are basically a map of water and workable soil. And because it's the northern highlands, the road can also be unpredictable. Landslides and mud are part of the story, especially in the wet season, when steep slopes and heavy rain can change a normal road into a problem in a matter of hours. And because it's the northern highlands, the road can also be unpredictable. Landslides and mud are part of the story, especially in the wet season, when steep slopes and heavy rain can change a normal road into a problem in a matter of hours. That's exactly what makes this kind of motorcycle travel so vivid. You are not sealed off from the environment. You feel every climb and descent. You notice the air change as you drop into a river valley. You smell wet earth and vegetation, and you become very aware of distance. Fuel stops can be limited, towns are small, and if something goes wrong, help may be far away. This is the kind of riding where your senses stay switched on. The road surface matters. The weather matters. Light matters. Even when the sky turns beautiful and clear after rain, the ground still remembers what happened the day before. And this ride includes a moment that perfectly captures what northern Vietnam travel was like in 2008. Before, routes like these became widely packaged and smoothed over by tourism. Even though the weather that day was beautiful and the rain had stopped, the road was still a mess. The landslide had damaged the route, and the solution wasn't a detour sign or a construction crew. It was local people, right there, ready to help. I paid the equivalent of about $1.20, and they helped guide my motorcycle down the mountain through their fields to bypass the block section. That's one of those travel moments you never forget, because it shows how these roads actually function, not as perfect infrastructure, but as living routes where communities adapt and travelers depend on local knowledge. From there, the ride continues toward Cho Ra, and that's an important point in the journey. Cho Ra is not just a place you pass through. It's historically a market town and a regional hub. Even today, it's widely known as the main gateway town for reaching Ba Be. If you travel from Hanoi by bus, for example, Cho Ra is the town many routes aim for first, and from there it's roughly 20 kilometers to Ba Be National Park. That makes sense geographically because Cho Ra sits at a kind of transition zone. You feel it as you approach. The harshness of the higher ridges begins to soften, valleys widen, greenery increases, and water becomes more dominant. You're shifting from the more exposed highland world into a landscape where rivers and forests start shaping the mood of the ride. After Cho Ra, the journey naturally continues into the Ba Be region, and the arrival is one of the most satisfying transitions in northern Vietnam travel. Ba Be is not just a lake, it's an entire protected ecosystem. Ba Be National Park, designated as a national park in 1992, covering over 10,000 hectares, and also recognized as an ASEAN Heritage Park. This is one of Vietnam's important conservation landscapes: forested hills, limestone formations, caves, rivers, and the lake system itself. Ba Be Lake is often described as Vietnam's largest natural freshwater lake. It stretches roughly 8 kilometers in length, sitting in a limestone basin surrounded by forested slopes and karst cliffs. Its name is often explained as three lakes, and in local Dai usage you'll also hear the idea of Slam PE connected to the lake's three linked sections, often referred to as Pi Lam, Pe Lu, and Pi Leng. The lake sits at around 145 to 150 meters above sea level, which is part of why the climate and atmosphere here can feel so different from the higher mountains you rode through earlier. What's especially fascinating is how the geology and the water system interact. Limestone landscapes often create caves, underground channels, and unusual drainage patterns, and Ba Be is a classic example of that. The lake is fed by rivers and streams, including the Nang River, and the broader national park area is known for dramatic karst features. One of the most famous examples is Puong Cave, a tunnel-like river cave formed where the Nang River flows through the limestone. It's described as around 300 meters long and up to about 30 meters high, and it's also known for its bat colonies, thousands of bats, with multiple species recorded. Even if your ride video doesn't linger inside caves, the fact that this kind of landscape exists right here tells you what sort of world you've entered, one where water and limestone have been shaping the terrain for millions of years. Culturally, the Ba Be region is strongly associated with Tay communities, and one of the most iconic parts of the experience is seeing villages of traditional stilt houses near the water. These aren't tourist props. They're practical architecture for a wet environment, lifting living spaces above damp ground and seasonal water changes. In this region, water is not just scenery, it's transportation, food, and rhythm. Fishing, farming, and moving by boat have long shaped daily life. So this ride is doing something very special. It connects a remote highland road world, mud, landslides, steep valleys, scattered villages, to a calmer destination where the landscape suddenly becomes water-centered, forested, and protected. That contrast is exactly what makes northern Vietnam so addictive for adventurous travelers. One day, you're negotiating mountain roads with local help, guiding you through muddy detours. The next, you're arriving at a lake system, surrounded by limestone peaks and jungle, where the whole pace of life feels slower. And the most important thing is this: in 2008, roads like this weren't products. They were real journeys. You earned every kilometer. You dealt with what the mountains gave you. You relied on local people. And because of that, the reward at the end, arriving at Ba Be, feels much deeper than simply reaching a sightseeing spot. You don't just travel across space. You travel across environments. You feel the shift from high ridges to river valleys to forested lake country. And the road teaches you something as it goes. Respect for distance, respect for terrain, and respect for the communities that have adapted to these mountains long before travelers ever arrive with cameras.